Hey, my name is Ash T, and on today's episode of The Dropouts, I have my twin, not my physical twin, but someone who was also a doctor, but not only a doctor, a pathologist, just like I was, who also quit to become an actor. So thank you, Jackie Dallas, for coming on board the show.
Thank you for having me, and it's so good to meet someone else like me.
I know, like I was telling you, I saw your profile and we auditioned. I was like, what? There's another pathologist that became an actor? No way. She's got to come on this podcast.
We're a rare breed.
We are. Did you grow up in California?
No, I'm actually originally from the East Coast. So I grew up in Florida, spent most of my adult life in New York, and then bounced around a lot. Lived in the Caribbean, lived in Chicago, lived in San Francisco, and now I'm in LA.
Okay, but in Florida, you were born to your parents who did what? Were they in the medical field?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone in my family is in medicine. So my dad was a family practitioner. My mom was a pediatrician. My sister went into OB-GYN. The next oldest cousin went into medicine. My uncle's an interventional radiologist.
Oh my God.
I think I have some oncologists and more radiologists on like the more distant ends of the family.
It's a cycle for you.
It's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
I didn't know any different.
So when you were growing up, did you have any dreams as a child? Were you like, I want to be a doctor just like my parents, or did something else come up?
I would say I suffered from kind of like occupational ADD as a child. So when I grew up, I wanted to be everything. I think a lot of kids grow up with that sense of direction. Like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a police officer. And for me, I just couldn't decide. Like, what I wanted to be when I grew up was a flavor of the week for me. So being an actor was something that always appealed to me, I would say. You get to be everything. You get to do everything. Every day is different, every project, every role. And that was really, really appealing to me. But I never believed, or I never thought that acting could be a real career. In Florida, in a small town, it's like the most you could be an actor was high school drama class, maybe a community theater, children's summer camp.
Did you believe that, or did someone tell you that you're not going to be able to be an actor?
Oh, it wasn't that they told me I couldn't be an actor initially, right? Yeah. It's just that nobody... I don't know, coming from Florida, like a small beach town in Florida, it was, it's such a land of, Hollywood is such a fantasy land, right? It's something you see on TV. It's like they propel you into these different worlds, these different universes, and you just have no idea how to even approach that. You have to be born into it, or super rich, or super beautiful, or, this unattainable
So you saw the data.
Level of talent. I'm sorry?
You saw the data.
The data. Yeah. Yeah. It's an odds game. It's I don't know. It's also just a complete lack of familiarity growing up with it. Whereas medicine, I was surrounded by, so it was no longer scary or daunting, or, I felt like I had a good grasp of that even as a kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I got to see my parents go all the way through from the residency process to starting their own practice, the whole path there.
Right. I think I remember bringing my shoes down to my dad as he would go to the hospital like at 2 a.m. Yeah. And it was just kind of understood that I was going to be a doctor, as far back as like 7 or 8. It's just like, well, I just have to make straight A's to become a doctor.
Exactly.
Was it like that for you? Did you have to make good grades, or what was...
I had excellent grades.
Yeah. Did you want to have excellent grades, or did you want to...
I, at the risk of sounding like a total snot here, I feel like academics was a very natural path for me. Maybe I was bred that way.
What is your ethnicity?
Korean.
Korean, yeah. So Korean families are very much academic oriented, right?
Very academic oriented. And, I was very blessed in the sense that my mother was very intelligent. She graduated top of her class. Even in Korea, she was like top of the class amongst all the other very intelligent, very driven, very ambitious, med students there. So I got my mother's genes, which I'm very grateful for. And then there's kind of this running joke in my family that my father is just very lucky. He's also very smart, love you, Dad. But he's very lucky. He always finds himself in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. And I think a combination of that just allowed me to kind of succeed in that path. It's not so much that Well, I wouldn't say that I didn't want to, but I wouldn't say I wanted to either. For me, it was kind of this natural next step that I never even questioned. Might be similar to what you were saying. It's like when you finish elementary school, what do? You go to middle school.
Yeah.
After middle school, what do? You go to high school. After high school, what do? You go to college. After college, you go to medical school. Like, I never even thought otherwise of it.
Yeah.
So that's just the path. When I enrolled in college, it was microbiology major, pre-med.
Yeah.
Didn't even think twice. I didn't even know there were other options. Liberal arts, what is that?
Okay, this makes a lot of sense because when I was in medical school, all the Koreans in my class always kicked my ass at every. They were all straight A's in everything. They killed anatomy, physiology, and I was like, God, give me a break here, people.
It's there's some parts of it that I just like flat out sucked at. Anatomy was interesting to me, so even though that wasn't the most natural, I found myself like actually studying that one. Like I would never say I'm happy to study, but it wasn't as painful as some of the other subjects. Like for me, physics was the bane of my existence.
Oh yeah, me too.
I remember in college, I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And finally, senior year, I had to take it to graduate, right? It was a requirement. And the only one left was a 7:30 a.m. course. And I just regretted putting it off so much.
Oh, God,
I was like, I already don't like this topic.
Yeah.
And now you're forcing me to wake up at 7:30 a.m. in college. Like,
forget it.
It was.
Yeah, you really
rough.
are my twin.
That was rough.
What happened to me was biochemistry was at 8 a.m. and you had to go to class. It was required, and I couldn't make it. So I failed biochemistry because I couldn't make it.
That's
early.
rough.
So,
was it one of those classrooms like 500 people in the room?
140.
Yeah, and then they give you like a little clicker thing or something. See, we schemed.
Yes.
Every person drew a straw, and it was like, you're the Monday person, you're the Wednesday person, you're the Friday person. So we're all like, and you have like 30 seconds to put in your answer. So we're just like, I shouldn't admit
now
to
you
that,
can say that,
but
because it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You're never going back. All right.
Physics
So,
uses that.
when was the first time that you tried out acting? How young were you?
I was pretty young. I was never really shy, and so I did probably a black box theater for children. I think we had Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or Snow
That's a fun
Queen.
one.
Like one of those kids plays. I wasn't very good, so I never got any of the lead roles. I think I was just like someone who danced in the background or something like that. But
I got Tissue Elf instead of Santa.
So I think that was my first taste of like being on stage and just being a part of something. And I thought that was really magical and a lot of fun. I had a lot of friends who were also kind of in that same space, and they were really talented and they had a great time. And I just remember admiring that and looking up to that and being like, I want to do that one day. But as you get older,
reality sets in.
Reality sets in. Yeah, you're totally right. So I kept doing, like high school theater. When I got too old for children's acting camp, I became a chaperone for it. I tried to keep it in my life as much as possible.
Yeah.
Really awkward talent shows and dance performances at.
Yeah, I forgot about talent shows.
Like, yeah. Just whatever stuff, like the assembly stuff.
Right.
Oh, gosh, cringe.
Okay, so.
Good thing for no social media.
I know, right? What school did you end up going to?
For college, I went to University of Gainesville in Florida.
And did you take any drama classes there?
I didn't. No,
not even one.
I ended up not really. So medicine, the pre-med track is still pretty grueling.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of
I know.
time and brain power.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really do any of the acting stuff at that point because I don't know, I kind of assimilated myself into this mentality. Like, all right, now it's getting real, right? Now you have to get serious. Now you have to study. Plus I was working as a bartender at the time, just to make some extra cash. Late nights, early mornings don't really mesh too well. I thoroughly enjoyed my time at the #1 party school at the time. We won the national championships. We won 3 of them in 2 years. So it was a very fun time to be in college.
Yeah.
Then I went to a Caribbean school for medical school, University of Antigua. And part of it was
because you partied so much in Florida.
that was a huge part of it. I'm not going to lie. But also I felt like at that time I wanted to do medicine on my terms. And this is totally backwards because knowing what I know now, it's so important to go to a good school. You know, that whole pedigree, what you bring with you is so important and valued, especially in the world of medicine. So if I could go back, I wouldn't change anything. But if I was still looking at it from a doctor perspective, I would have said, you know, go to a U.S. school, go to a school with a name or a reputation if you can get into it, because that's just going to make your path in the future so much easier. But I didn't. I was like, oh, I like bartending. I think I'm going to, you know, pull a Tom Cruise cocktail and bartend in the Caribbean and study on the beach and learn how to sail. And that's what I did. And I had a wonderful time. But
see, I'm the opposite now because I went to UVA med school and I had to compete with all those people. I'm like, man, I wish I went. Yeah. Now I wish I went to a school that was a little bit easier.
It was, I mean,
Just take my time.
I wouldn't say it was easy still, but at the same time, like, I think it catered to my lifestyle, what I wanted out of a lifestyle a little bit more.
Near the beach.
You know,
stuff.
I could study at the beach or at a bar.
Yeah.
I could do things on the weekends that didn't involve a library. You know, I got to find a balance of being a student and then, you know, being a girl in my early 20s. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's 4 years of med school. You're definitely not doing acting here, probably.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, there's just no time for it.
Yeah.
I got back into acting when I was in Chicago doing pathology. So I had kind of a roundabout course here.
So right after the Caribbean, you did something different, right?
Right. So after the Caribbean, so the way our school was structured is 2 years of basic sciences, which is just your tests, your book work, you know, stuff like that. You could do that anywhere. So that was all in the island. And because it was a U.S. accredited school for clinicals, we would come back to the U.S. and work in the U.S. hospitals so that we got used to that sort of practice, you know, our the protocols and the EMRs and, you know, electronic medical records and all of that. So I started off working in Miami at a few hospitals, and then I did a couple rotations in New York, fell in love with New York, and was like, okay, this is where I'm going to stay. I'm going to figure it out.
I guess, yeah, New York's a lot different than Florida.
So different.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for my personality, like I said, I'm always constantly having to do things and explore and, you know, just try and, I don't know, do everything. New York really catered to my personality, the speed of it, the variety of things to do. So staying in New York, I decided I wanted to go into surgery. I loved my rotation. Something about just the job description of it, like, gosh, you get to like operate on people. It's like a little twisted, but really exciting. Yeah. I liked the instant gratification of it.
But,
I feel like
but while doing that rotation in surgery, all we're doing the third and fourth year is you're just
holding, you're just
exactly.
retracting.
How could you enjoy that?
Well, okay. I mean, I could see like in the future, like that's so cool. Yeah. That's what I want to do, you know? And seeing just, like I said, the instant gratification results. I felt like a lot of the medicine rotations were, okay, well, it might be this, it might be that. Let's get you worked up for this. Come back in 6 weeks. Let's try this medication, see how you feel. It was this prolonged, I don't know.
You just put the Band-Aid on the wound. You never fix anything.
You're just not sure, you know? Yeah. And I didn't care a whole lot for that aspect of it. Surgery was like, okay, you come in. I've never met you before, or maybe you have. Figure out what's the problem. Can you fix it? Can you not? If you can't, you know, refer to medicine. Yeah. And if you can fix it, you take them into the OR, you fix it, make sure they're all good, have, you know, just feel like you've walked away from something knowing that you've actually changed something for the better. Yeah. Hopefully.
But here's the other problem. Getting up early. That's what made me not want to be a surgeon.
I should have learned from physics.
Yeah, exactly. Getting up 5 a.m., having a round on all those people.
Oh my gosh. You should see me like the first few weeks, I'd be like, okay, let's be presentable. And a few weeks later, I'm just like, I don't even care. Yeah. Like, I'm going to wake up 5 minutes before I have to like run out the door. Right. Waking up early was rough. I think another aspect of that lifestyle that in my head knew but didn't really comprehend was how demanding that lifestyle would be. You're literally at the hospital and your patient's beck and call 24/7. It doesn't matter if you're on call or not. If it's someone that you've operated on, you have some sort of a responsibility or an obligation, even if it's your colleague that's going to be kind of taking over whatever post-operative, if it's a complication or something else that happens, they're probably going to call you and say, hey, what happened? What did you do in the OR? Like, what was your technique? Like, how did you close? And I don't know how technical all this conversation is for viewers who didn't go through medical school.
I'm sure they're fascinated.
But there's a lot of questions that can arise because every person is complicated, right? So I don't know. I just remember like constantly working, and there were two deciding factors for me as to when I decided to leave surgery specifically.
Okay, so you're doing surgery at what place did you?
This is the Mount Sinai Hospital
Mount Sinai
in New York.
for 1 year.
For
right?
1 year. I did my intern year there.
All right.
And I had done a year of research before that to get into the program.
Gotcha.
I totally skipped that step.
Yeah.
Coming from a Caribbean school, it's a lot more complicated getting into a good residency program. Mount Sinai was pretty well reputed, and I wanted to do surgery, which is an ambitious field.
Okay, so this is where our paths diverge, because my third year of school, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I don't like anything. I hate every rotation.
Yeah.
And my fourth year, I was like, oh, but pathology, you get to get up a little bit later, and you just look up slides. This is great.
Yeah.
I'll do this.
It's as close to a 9 to 5 as you can get in medicine.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I came to that realization a little later.
But I was very upset the whole time I was there. I was like, I should be an actor. Like my whole life, I was like, I should be an actor.
Yeah.
That's what was going on in my mind. But it sounds like you were okay being a surgeon, and
I feel like I'm a stay the course kind of person when
much stable, more stable.
I don't know. I think that contradicts what I said earlier about having life ADD. But I think my personality is try to make the best of everything, try to see the positives. My mom said I was like a pathological optimist as a child. So I think whatever path I set out for, one, I'm like intensely determined to succeed in it. And then two, find happiness in it, right? Like I hate waking up and not wanting to wake up, right? That's such a terrible feeling. So I tried to find what I liked about certain things. How can I attain the goal? It became a challenge. It's almost like the thrill of the chase sort of is, mentality. They're like, oh, you can't be a surgeon. You're not a U.S. graduate. Your med school GPA is not high enough, or your MCAT, or not MCAT, USMLE scores were not high enough, And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
So I did a year of research there, in which case I basically harassed the resident in charge of research to give me like a job. And he was like, we don't really have that position here. I was like, well, I can just come and help. You can not pay me, like like not an intern in medicine, but like any other occupation intern.
Yeah.
He's like, fine, just why don't you come in on one of our meetings and we'll see how it goes. I was like, I can be your little scut monkey. I'll just like run data for you, the boring stuff that no one wants to do.
I like to do research and the scut work. So
I fell in love with research. I do. I really love it. And that's how I met my future husband. We published a lot of papers together. We did a lot of good things. And I think it was because of that, the residency program at Sinai was like, all right, well, you don't fit our pedigree, but we'll give you a chance, So I had a lot of imposter syndrome that year. There's a lot
As a surgeon?
Yeah, in my intern year. I was working with people who went to Johns Hopkins, went to Yale, went to these top institutions that everyone recognizes the name of. And I was like, I went to the Caribbean. Right? So, there was a lot of imposter syndrome. And then the demands of it was very stressful. There were two moments. One was I couldn't go to one of my best friend's weddings. I just couldn't get the weekend off. And I was like, I don't understand. There's 4 weekends. There's like so many of us. Why can't I have that one off? They're like, the schedule's already set. It's the inflexibility of it astounded me. It was horrific. I was like, no, this is not acceptable. I threw a fit. I was so unprofessional. But at the end of the day, I showed up for my shift and I didn't go to the wedding. And it was really rough. The other one was during one of the rotations, one of my attending doctors had been planning her daughter's bat mitzvah. And she had spent all this time, all this money, all these people were coming. She wasn't on call. And the day of, I think there was some sort of emergency surgery that had come in, and she ended up having to just stay hours for it. So she missed her daughter's bat mitzvah after all of that. And I was like, that's not acceptable either.
Yeah.
So I had to really self-assess whether that was something I was okay with long term, something I was willing to do, sacrifice that much. And I don't know if that doesn't make me a good person, but I'm too selfish for that. I need my time. I need my mental space. Oh, that was the other thing. I was like mentally deteriorating at that point.
Did you talk to your parents about any of this stuff?
Yeah, it was rough, and my parents were like, "Well, why'd you go into surgery?" I was like, "Because
why not
I
dermatology?
wanted to be better than everyone else in my family." Well, so at the time, I was like, "All right, this isn't gonna work." Going through the whole application process again is such a ordeal.
Yeah.
But my boyfriend at the time, who would turn into my fiance, my husband, was like, why don't you look into pathology? Because that's such a cushier job.
Yeah, totally is.
Right? And having the anatomical background of it made it, I think, that much easier for me to assimilate into that line of training. So I did that, moved from New York to Chicago at UIC Hospital, and got into the pathology program there. Opposite of you did clinical pathology, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to do just anatomical. I was so interested in forensics and, the biopsies. I didn't hate it. It's a little boring, but I didn't hate it. So I did that for 3 years. No, my mistake. I did that for 2 years, and it was a 3-year program. And it was the last year that I decided that.
Oh, it was only a 3-year program there. Because you already finished a year.
Right. And then AP and CP is an extra year to do both. But if you're just focusing on one, it's a little, shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 3 years. You got the end of it.
Yeah. I think I was trying to find, the happiness in it. And I was like, it's okay. But it doesn't stir me, I didn't wake up every morning thinking like, wow, I'm going to change the world. It was kind of like snooze. And that's what I always told myself I wouldn't do. I always told myself I wasn't going to settle into something that wasn't going to make me happy. So had to find something else to do.
So what happened after that?
An opportunity presented itself. I think in some alternate universe, there may be a version of me that's still doing pathology and doing acting as a hobby, on the side. But my husband is, he's 1 academic year or 2 academic years behind me. So when it came time for him to find a residency, he had done his, sub-internships at, U Chicago, Northwestern, and all of those. And he's really smart. He's the smartest man I know. He ended up matching at Stanford. Thinking, he was like, I didn't think I'd get in. I was like, well, of course you got in. And, once you get into a residency, you're kind of committed. It's like a contract, right? You can't just like, oh, I changed my mind, I'll go over here instead. Where you get in is where you get in. So he was going to California and I was in Chicago. So we had to decide, were we going to prioritize our career at this point in our relationship? We'd been dating for, I think, two years. Or are we going to prioritize the relationship? Because his program was 6 years. And then I still had years to go, plus fellowship. And it's like, when you're looking at, we'd already done 2 years apart because I was in Chicago for 2 years. Are we looking at 4 years apart, 6 years apart, 7 years apart? Is that viable for a healthy relationship? Is that going to work? And we came to the conclusion, I came to the conclusion that I would move to California. I thought it was a good fork in the road for me in medicine. And I said, if I'm not happy doing this, there's a chance I'm not going to do it for the rest of my life. How important is it for me to finish this last year?
Oh, okay. So you had one more year left.
I had one more year left.
And there was no way you could transfer
No. I mean, theoretically there is, right? There's the SOAP. I don't even know what that stands for, but it wasn't something that I was
just weren't passionate about it.
Yeah, it just wasn't. I'm trying to be PC about it.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, an MD is always going to be there for me. I don't know what I'll do with it, but it's always going to be there. It's kind of cool to say, hey, I'm a doctor. If I'm going to move to California, why not try something new, right? And California is the land of acting. So I was like, wow, can I actually do this now? Is this something I can pursue?
Well, how did your parents feel about all this?
Surprisingly, I'll give them credit. They were very supportive.
Oh, wow.
They were very
They were probably like, pathologists? We don't need any pathologists in the family.
Well, I think that, you know, they saw how unhappy I was in surgery. When I chose pathology, they were like, that's a weird personality choice for you. You know, they were like, I can't really see you as a pathologist. And they saw I wasn't really happy doing that either. So at the end of the day, I think as much as Asian parents want their kids to be doctors, like all parents, I think they want their kids to be happy. And so when I told them that I was switching careers, they had their hesitations. They were worried. They voiced those worries, but
repeatedly.
At the end of the day, they were like, let's see what happens. You know, medicine probably wasn't the best personality fitted, you know, occupation for me. So explore, see, 2 years from now, let's touch base.
Maybe
right?
they're like, it's your fiance's problem now.
Yeah. Get married. Get on his health insurance before I get unemployed.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was in 2014. 2013 around Christmas time is when I told my program I wasn't going to renew. They really tried to talk me out of it. Everyone thought I was nuts.
You'll never work in this town again.
I probably would have thought I was nuts. You know, they're like, you've come so far. You've done so much. You know, you're so close. And logically, you know, it doesn't make any sense to not just finish out the year.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I was being very stubborn. So I didn't renew. Last day, I turned in my badge, turned in my white coat. Bought a car because I didn't have a car in Chicago. You know, it's downtown. And loaded it up with everything I owned. My sister flew into Chicago and we road tripped the Route 66 all the way to California. And that was like the journey. That was the transition to a new life.
The classic Hollywood story. Pack all your car up with everything.
Just throw everything in there. Yeah. So that's what had happened. And that was 2014.
And you haven't looked back.
I haven't looked back. Yeah. I think it was naive of me to say, like everyone else I'm sure does, oh, give it a year, give it 2 years, you know? Because, man, Hollywood takes so much longer than that, you know? It takes so much longer than that. But it wasn't that I found success a year or two in. It was that I found happiness. You know what I mean? It was like, I can live frugally. I can have 100 side hustles. You know, I was bartending again. I was dog sitting. I was driving for Uber.
Wow.
You know, whatever it is that I could to make ends meet. And I was okay with that. I was totally okay with that.
Because you were pursuing your passion.
That's right.
That you didn't know about until 2014. You're like, this is what I always wanted to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. I did some like student films and things in Chicago just to kind of like test the waters.
Oh, okay. So you did have a little bit of that.
Yeah, I had like maybe 4 months of testing the waters out there. But it was
so it's easier to make the decision.
Yeah.
Because
as far as being an actor, right? Because
exactly.
coming to California, I could have been like, oh, maybe I'll just work in a med spa and do Botox, you know? But acting was reintroduced into my life at the time. And honestly, like some of the things that everyone starts out doing are kind of not great.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think if you can, it's like the worst day on set was still like just as good or better than like my best day in medicine.
Right.
You know? it was that much more fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah.
My path was a little bit longer. I decided to finish that last year, pathology.
Yeah.
I kind of convinced myself that I love doing research, and I was a, research scholar. So then, I did my fellowship at NIH, and then I went to MD Anderson Cancer Center. But at that point, it was like, all right, I've achieved everything, and now it's kind of boring. This, but I'd fooled myself into thinking that I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, I feel like medicine is easy to delude yourself into thinking,
Yeah.
oh, it's going to get better. The next step is going to be so much cooler.
Yeah.
It's like med school is like, oh God, med school is so, ugh. Once I get into residency, it'll be so much better. Intern, you're like, oh my God, this sucks.
Yeah.
When I'm a senior, when I'm not a junior resident anymore, it'll be great. When I'm in attending, I think you always tell yourself the next step just to keep yourself going, because you feel, I think it's natural to feel a little trapped, right? Because you have invested so much time and energy and money, blood, sweat, tears into it, your life, you're going to be 30 by the time you get out of it, right? So at that point, I think it's easy to tell yourself, well, this is tried and true. I'm going to have a good, stable financial life. And why not just stay the course?
Yeah.
And like I said, in an alternate universe, that might have been me. But the opportunity of, the secret, I don't know, the twist of fate was my husband matching at Stanford.
Oh yeah,
that's what it was.
That's what it was. Gotcha. So, is there any point in this career, because it's so hard to make it as an actor in Hollywood, where you felt like, I wish I just finished that year of residency so I could make some money?
I think the first year was really rough. First year was really rough for a variety of reasons. I was in a new place. I'd never been before. The culture in California is very different from New York or Florida. I was trying to do this new career path that I knew nothing about. I mean, even just like, never mind, like, how do you get into SAG and how do you find an agent? It's like, what's a slate?
Right.
What is a headshot? Like,
Where's the 101?
Where's the one? How do I get past the 101? Jesus. Yeah, it was like a whole nother level of trying to navigate this new life, and coming from a place where I was, very, what was the word I'm looking for? I felt confident in medicine in the sense that I had done the work. I had done the education, the training for it. I felt confident being with my peers. We could talk the same language. Moving to California and talking about actors, I was like, you could be speaking Greek to me. I had to learn everything from scratch. And being a personality type that likes to be in control of her situation, it felt so chaotic for me at first. And then, of course, you have to take that humble pie. You can't say, oh, I'm a doctor. You're a dog sitter,
Right.
Going back to bartending, which I always loved bartending. Driving for Uber, like I said. And I had like 16 other random side hustles, brand ambassador, the person at the grocery store being like, would you like to sample our cheese? Right? So having to take that step back while simultaneously watching all of my colleagues from medicine graduate, start buying houses, start buying their Lexuses and their Mercedes, and having, this picturesque life that they've earned. Whereas I was like, okay, I'm just in my 1-bedroom apartment with
dog sitting
with 16-year-old carpet, So it was definitely a step back.
Joke's on them though now.
So, but yeah, that first year was hard. The imposter syndrome came back in a whole new way. I was like, did I just make literally the stupidest mistake of my life?
Yeah.
Right? Because how can you go back to that? But that kind of turned into a determination and a challenge. And I assumed the mentality was like, this isn't a hobby. This isn't just a plan B. This is a do or die, because I walked away from that. I have no choice. I have to succeed in this,
Yeah. And I think, going through medical school and residency and all that stuff makes you a completely different person. It really hardens you, your soul. You realize you can really do whatever you want to.
Yeah, I think there's a huge part of that that I attribute my success to.
Yeah.
The work ethic, the ability to not eat or sleep for days.
Yeah.
Not being afraid to do the homework, to do the research, to prep, right? Just be neurotic about like even auditions, like memorizing the lines. I mean, I was reading that like it was a biochemistry book. I was like, no, it was the room, not a room, like the most neurotic little things.
The writer's word is all important.
Right.
You must have everything right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just, trying to package my like actor portfolio as professionally as I could, doing research and all the headshots. Like I started off with like a cell phone photo and I was immediately like, no, this is not good enough,
Yeah.
So I think kind of approaching it from that business perspective, even though it's a passion, a business perspective, not a dream perspective. Because also when you get into something in your 30s and you've done a career, I think you start to recognize that nobody's there to make your dreams come true. If it's a business and this is a multi-billion-dollar business, who's going to take a chance on someone who's so green, who doesn't even have the basic materials together? It's like applying for residency all over again.
Yeah.
So
true.
I was like, the whole term fake it till you make it, I was like, my packet is going to be like the most professional thing. Like, yeah. So
until you saw mine and then you were like, oh,
I modeled mine after yours. I was like, I gotta be like him.
Yeah. Well, 8 years in, and it seems like you're very happy with this new career as an actress.
Yeah.
And you've been on how many TV shows now? A multitude.
Probably a dozen or so. Yeah. I've been very lucky. I think I didn't land in LA when I first moved to California. Stanford's in Northern California.
Right.
So I actually ended up in the Bay Area first, which, not knowing anything about acting, did not realize there was a difference between San Francisco and LA. I think a lot of people on the East Coast are like, oh, it's like what, a 2-hour drive?
That's what I thought.
So starting off in the Bay Area, which is a much smaller market, much less actors, but a lot of commercials, surprisingly. I think I was able to build a good body of work much more easily than I would have if I had started off in LA. Because here, everyone is just banging on doors trying to get their foot in. Whereas in the Bay Area, every actor there is like, it's a hobby. I do it on the weekends. It's cool if I get an audition. Not everyone, but like the vast majority of them. So you get to see the same people over and over and over again in the audition rooms. You get to set and you work with the same people over and over and over again, and it builds this kind of a film family. It was really nice. It was very supportive. Everyone is happy to share their tips and their secrets and their connections and introduce you and bring you on for their projects. So I think it was very lucky in how that happened, because by the time I moved to LA, I had demo reels. I had supporting and lead roles on my resume. They were all indie films, but like I had it,
Yeah.
So it kind of made it seem like I had been working for longer and done bigger things. And then I started making the drive back and forth, San Francisco to LA, which was brutal. But I didn't have to do it too often, because when you're starting out, you get an audition maybe like once every 10 months.
Too bad that it wasn't pandemic days. Then you wouldn't have to drive at all.
I know, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like I move here and now it doesn't matter where you live. That's so funny. No, there's still an advantage to being here.
Yeah,
I firmly believe
so.
that. I think there's still a huge advantage to being here.
Yeah, like you wouldn't drive here to do a podcast from San Francisco.
No, probably not. But yeah, I started doing that, and the crazy part of me was like, LA is just too hard. At the time, Atlanta was really picking up. So much was filming over there. So I did another impulsive thing. I bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta. I Airbnb'd for 6 weeks, and I was like, I'm going to figure out this market. I kind of kind of getting familiar with LA, just enough to recognize I'm not ready for LA.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's like if you're not at least SAG eligible or with one recognizable credit, it's so hard to get an agent, so hard to get in the room, right? I was getting one audition every 10 months. Like, that's not, I don't want to spend 10 years before I get a break, right?
Right.
So went to Atlanta, kind of studied that market for a bit, did background work, did a couple casting workshops. Every actor that I met, same as San Francisco, I was asking 100 questions. I was being so annoying.
Yeah.
But I learned enough, got an agent out there, and I actually, even to this day, have booked more work out of the Southeast than I have in LA. Because LA is just so competitive.
It is. It really is. I think I've only booked one thing on the Southeast, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a different market, you know? Do you have an agent out there?
Yeah.
Yeah? Who are you with, if you don't mind me asking?
Crossbeam Talent.
Okay. Yeah, I signed with my very first agent out there. He's based out of New Orleans, actually, and he got me my first job. He's got me a lot of jobs since then.
Do you fly of your own money to say I'm gonna be a
I did
local hire?
at first a lot. I did at first a lot because that's kind of like your that's your negotiation, right? You're like, I can cost you less money if you hire me.
Yeah.
So, and at the time for me, like the credit was so much more important than the cash.
Absolutely.
Right. So I would, I think my first 4 or 5 roles out there were all local hire. I put myself in a hotel, drove my own like rental car or Uber, depending on the situation, my own flights. I traveled
did that
Spirit.
one time.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm never doing this.
It's a lot.
Again. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's stressful.
Yeah.
Spirit in a backpack.
Yeah.
Living,
Living that Spirit lifestyle.
Oh, yeah. I still fly Spirit. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I did that a few times. And you know what gets you into trouble doing that, though, which is really stressful, is when there's a date change or, when they move your schedule around.
Right, totally.
And then you have to buy another ticket or you have to extend your stay.
Yeah.
That happened to me on NCIS New Orleans when I did it. I was supposed to film on a Monday, so I had to fly in on a Friday to do my wardrobe fitting. And come Monday, they pushed it to Thursday. So I ended up sitting there for like a whole week.
Wow.
I love New Orleans, but a week is too long in New Orleans.
Yeah. Well, for someone that's sitting there in their job and they're hating life and they want to try this other thing, this creative path, anything, music, dance, ballet, whatever it is, what advice do you have for them right now?
I would say, one, don't delude yourself into thinking it's too late or it's not possible, because at the risk of sounding like overly optimistic, like anything is possible, clearly, but I will say approach it smart, because 99% of people who pursue something creative do it as a dream, as a passion, as it should be, but it is a business. Do your research, understand how to get started, what to look for in order to succeed, what the people in charge are looking for. You're the product. How can you package yourself the most appealing way, the most experienced and professional way? Because that's what people want to work with, right? You want to work with people who are going to take their careers seriously, who are going to show up, who are going to still be doing it years from now, because it's so hard developing a relationship with someone and then finding out a year later they're like, all right, peace, right? You're going to invest a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort starting out. So be prepared, be efficient, have a backup, not a backup plan, have a backup financial plan, right? Don't quit your day job just yet. You have to balance between like being this reckless, impulsive, creative artist and not being a starving one, right? Be a responsible, rent-paying, food-buying adult.
Unless that's your thing.
Unless that's your thing, right? That's a whole nother...
Unless you like being against the wall, cornered against the wall, and
right?
you'll figure it out.
If you want to be the musician in Venice, then that's a whole nother thing. But that would be my advice. Just be smart about it. And don't be afraid to pull the trigger one day. Because I know a lot of people who are
testing the waters,
lifelong hobbyists or lifelong students. You know, I
Yeah.
know a lot of actors who have made it to LA, but they can't stop. I asked them, I'm like, when are you going to get an agent? You know, you should start submitting now. You know, you've got like student films, you've got stuff on your resume. Just start. The worst they could say is no, and then you just resubmit like 6 months from now. They're like, oh, I'm going to do it after I get my next headshots. I'm going to do it after this class. Oh, there's a workshop coming up. There's always a reason to wait, just like anything else in life. There's a day you just got to do it.
Pull the trigger on it.
Pull the trigger on it, whether it's step 1, moving to LA, step 2, quitting your day job, step 3, just throwing all your submissions out there and hoping for the best. You gotta have faith that lightning is gonna strike, because that's what half this industry is. You know, you do have to do the preparation, but man, so much of it is out of your control. You just gotta whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I think.
It's a tough place to be, where you always want to be in control, in previous life. And now you're completely out of control.
Learning to let go.
Yeah.
Learning to let go.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.